I'm Tyler, Mr. Trees. Today we're going to reset the worm bin. You don't need anything crazy or spectacular or brilliant. As you can see, this is just a radio flyer wagon. It's a plastic one I can pull off the sides and do all kinds of, break it down to clean it if I'd like. There's a hole down here in the bottom, and if there's not, all you really need is, here's a tub, just as an example. Two different examples here. Regular old tub, couple holes drilled in the bottom. Little worm bin action popping off here. And as you can see, we'll disturb this here in a second. We'll come back to this. Drains out, keeps it moist, worms are inactive. You could also use just a regular old pot. This is like a, I don't know, 30-gallon pot, something like that, 40-gallon pot. Boom, worm bin. Holes are already involved. The trick to all this is get yourself a mosquito netting or a bed sheet, some sort of breathable fabric that you can lay down as a filter or a liner so the worms can't escape, and you can kind of keep everything intact and clean, keep bugs out, everything, organized. You can use, all you really need is a place for them to live and some fresh material from the kitchen or leaves or other stuff that you have here. But most people that are in the city, I prefer to get like fresh manure of some sort, horse, steer, cow, sheep, what have you. And we'll set it off into a pile. We'll rinse it off, we'll hose it down, we'll let it kind of compost for a while, make sure it's overly done, and then before adding it to the worm bin. One thing to take into consideration when you're adding manures to a worm bin, if you're going to do this style, is there are a lot of wormicides and antibiotics and funny things that can happen if you just buy like a bagged steer manure or something from Home Depot, or you source it from someplace and they're not organically minded. So the trick is to hose it down, and what I'll do is I'll take this here and I'll open up the bags a couple days beforehand, and I'll just kind of hose them off, kind of rinse off all of the manure or castings or whatever. But if you're in the city, you can go to Home Depot or a nursery or any place and find a cheap bag of steer manure or cow manure. You can punch a couple holes in the bottom here so that the water leaks out, and ultimately you just kind of wash it through and rinse it out, let it sit and do that a little while, and then when you're ready, I did that a couple days ago just to kind of rinse out any wormicides and get it moist and ready to work with. When you're ready to add it to the worm bin's clear, the hole's clear, you got your liner down so that nothing falls through and everything kind of self-contained. Then you just dump in the manure. And just smear this around a little bit, filling in the areas. I'm gonna add this other bag here. And normally before I add any worms of any type, I'll have rinsed this several times and I'll let it sit out for at least, a month or so before I start thinking about adding worms to it, just to make sure that I've kind of sterilized it and pushed all that crap out of here, flushed it out of there and whatnot. But I've already been doing that with this. So at this point, I like to soak it down a little bit, make sure it's evenly moist, and I always make it a little extra sloshy for the first initial setup. That way, you don't have any dry pockets. You can be sure the worms like it sloshy. You can't drown them. They're breathing oxygen a whole different way. So get it nice and sloshy. Make sure that it's good in a habitable place for these worms to start kind of making it through. And if you notice, once you start making this sloshy, a bunch of leachate will start coming out the bottom from your hole. You don't want to capture that right away. I always usually let that stuff kind of roll out, or I'll catch it and then just kind of throw it out in the lawn or out on stuff that doesn't really matter. Just because it's going to be really strong and really powerful, you can burn some plants with that initial manure leachate, depending on what you're using. So just easy, common practice to just capture it, throw that out for a little while until the worms have kind of established and started to take over the bin. It could be, you know, a month or so. Now that we're good and sloshy, we want to add our worms. Now from the bin before, here I had all these worms in this little casting blocks here. I call these little worm casting bombs, and boom, you got worms hanging out in there, little red wigglers and all kinds of the other inoculums, the nematodes, all that stuff from that previous batch. And this previous batch, come on over here, bless you. This previous batch here is what we got our pull. We've been using this for months. I've been getting bags and bags, probably got, you know, a giant tub of this full, or maybe a little less, of pure worm castings, 2.5 years, almost 3 years aged. And that is what these little cluster bombs are. So there's all kinds of beneficial nematodes. Got the worms added in here and everything's kind of taken care of, your little inoculum bombs. Then you can go ahead and you take your food source, and I always get some leaves. These are some moringa tree leaves, sugar cane leaves, chopped up corn stalks, other types of beneficial plants and stuff. And this is going to insulate it. You can use straw, you can use paper in a lot of cases, like brown bag type paper, shredded up, you know, cardboard, stuff like that. But we need to keep these guys warm. We're going into winter. They're not going to do a lot of anything for the next couple months here. They're going to move slow, but we'll fill this up a little bit, get a good little inch layer, and then I'll take a couple of these avocados and I'll start to get the populations up. Just take an avocado and plug one in there, kind of lightly cover it up. Take another one, I'll plug it right there. And what this will do is this will call all the worms that are in here to these little avocados. And when they get close to each other, they breed. All they have to do is row up against each other, and they swap fluids and make babies. So if you're getting them all close together, you're gonna blow up your population, plus it's a good solid food source for them right away. So I usually, these are small avocados, I usually only add one and or two halves that we didn't eat, but because these are small and gonna go bad, I'm just gonna throw them in the bin. And I'm gonna go collect a couple more leaves and stuff to insulate the top. And then when you're all done with all of that, basically you hose her down one last time to settle in the machine. And once you settle in the machine, you are rocking and rolling. Gotta get some sort of a cover. Doesn't have to be anything crazy, but if you get the mosquito netting, you can cover it up one more time over the top. You'll keep all kinds of things out of it that you may or may not want hanging in there. So once it's all kind of hosed down and taken care of, nothing. Boom. Looks like we're wagging. I'm Tyler, Mr. Trees. Do some worms. So we just set up the worm bin using box store steer manure bags for like $2 a bag, and some collected leaves and materials from around the property. Things you want to put into your worm bin can be anything from leaves and little sticks and twigs for the lignins, and you can use hardwoods if you're going to do it for long term, but most people just use kitchen scraps, things like, you know, lettuces and banana peels, old avocados, and just all the choppings and droppings of the things that you didn't eat in your meal that day. Collect a majority of them and add them to your worm bin sparingly. A good tip that I can put out there is don't feed your worm bin too much. Don't put a bunch of sloppy, wet vegetable stuff on the surface of your worm bin constantly to where it's just this crazy, goopy, nasty mess. That's gonna bring in the bugs. That's gonna bring in the problems, and those worms can only do so much at such a little time. So less is always more. I always make sure there's something in there for those worms to eat. That way they're happy and they're, you know, able to replicate and kind of do their thing. But I never want to overdo it. And if you're opening up my worm bins, you usually see them. They're more, you know, they're more clean than they are dirty, except for initially, because initially I'm trying to insulate them and stuff, and really just get the ball rolling. But After that, I add sparingly. I choose the good stuff to kind of put into the worm bins, the select vegetable scraps, so to speak. Things you don't want to add until you go down the crazy rabbit holes and really want to take this to the next level. The things you should just stay away from putting in the worm bin or in the compost pile is like meat products, any type of meat, any dairy products. I don't like doing any onions or citrus, directly. I'll throw some citrus, in the compost pile and in very small amounts if it's just laying around there. I'm not going to do it, but I'm not going to add a whole bunch of citrus to that type of thing. And I just kind of keep the citrus and the onions and the meat and the dairy and stuff like that out of the worm bin itself. I do love melons and avocados and round meaty fruits that I can cut, kind of put down as a protective layer, and they can kind of mine up, get them closer, they can breed and multiply. It's a great technique. During the winter months, I try to move them out and get them a little bit more, here in, we're in SoCal. It does get a little chilly. We get some chill, we get some frost, but I try to, move them out so they get a little bit more morning sun and kind of warm up those bins a little bit, or I try to wrap them up in a little blanket or something at night just to kind of keep them from getting really cold if they're plastic or anything like that. But generally speaking, if it's big enough and you got enough stuff in there, you can insulate it pretty good. They'll be all right. Might not be very crazy workhorses during the winter, but they're gonna do all right. Yeah, I'm trying to think. You can add alfalfas and kelps, and you can use little boosters and things, but really keep it simple. Start small, use a couple avocados or watermelons, those work great. Get a thing of manure and have at it. The more high quality your ingredients are at the beginning, like if you can source better quality manures where you are, or you're on a farm and you can collect certain things, definitely do it. That's the best way to go. I just wanted to make a video so that anybody, like in their backyard, they have a wagon from their kids lying around, or a little bin from an old Christmas, ornament, collection or whatever. You can make a worm bin that's functional for pennies on the dollar, just kind of using what you got around you. So, yeah, I'm Tyler, Mr. Trees. If you guys got questions or anything, please reach out, find me. And yeah, keep growing, keep doing your thing. Talk to you later.